Then you have to think he was on an offense that ranked 4th in 2016. We're talking the Patriots. And then he was on an offense that was ranked 7th in 2017 with the Eagles. And for those of you living under a rock, he's now with the Lions. In that offense, the past 2 seasons, 2016, 2017, it ranked 21st and 13th. So no matter which way you split it, he's getting a downgrade in scoring opportunities and overall efficiency of the offense. And I don't care how many of you are trying to say that Detroit is going to be a better offense this season. They're not going to step into the same territory that the Eagles were last year or the Patriots were the year before. They're just not going to take a step into that elite territory. The most arguable thing you could say about this offense being improved is, well, the offensive line, but also the new rookie that they signed, Kerryon Johnson, who we project to be quite spectacular this season. Clearly, he's going to be featured more between the 20s, but when you have Blount, who is supposed to be the red zone guy, if he's going to be inefficient on these red zone touches, is it going to surprise anyone if Kerryon Johnson ends up taking over that role as well? And it's one of the reasons why we like Kerryon Johnson this year. Now, other than that, though, he is going to have such a low floor just due to his lack of involvement in the receiving game. In his 9 NFL seasons, excluding one single year, his career high in targets is 8. You heard that right. Not receptions, targets. His career high in targets is 8, excluding 1 year, of course. So Blount himself has arguably the lowest receiving floor in the entire league, so he is going to need those touchdowns to stay relevant, which, as we know, for a running back who needs touchdowns, he's going to have extreme volatility week to week with no real upside. So to summarize Blount this year, you have a player who's viewed as a goal line back who really wasn't that good with his goal line carries last year on a really good offense. Now he's on a team that's going to see more than likely less scoring opportunities. He's also an old back, so as we know, the production continues to fall off. So even though he was quote unquote efficient last season, we can't expect him to remain as efficient coming into this season. Now he's also not going to be used in the receiving game, so when you factor all those things together, there is just no excuse for taking him, even if it's with one of your late round picks. If you ask us, it is just a complete waste. The next player on this list is Foreman of the Houston Texans, and I won't go into too much depth on this one because I have touched on him in other videos, but I am going to give you guys the highlights today. Simply put, Foreman is a bad pick right now, and it blows my mind why people are still drafting him and thinking that he has upside right now. First point being, nobody should be realistically expecting Foreman to be healthy to start the season. The only reason people still hold out hope is because the reports are coming out saying stuff like the Texans are not sure if Foreman will be ready week 1, and just because people are saying the words ready and week 1 is kind of making it seem as though there is a legitimate shot at him playing in week 1, but realistically there is not. The expectation is completely unrealistic when you break down what type of injury he actually suffered, and anyone who believes that just hasn't dove into the history of these injuries and the statistics behind them. So for those of you who don't know what injury I'm talking about, Foreman suffered a ruptured Achilles on November 19th of last season. Studies have shown that of the 31 players that have had a ruptured Achilles recently, only 21 returned to play. So that's only 64% of players have even returned at all. Of those 64%, it took an average recovery time of 11 months to see the field. That would slot out a more realistic timetable for return somewhere around mid-October. But let's play devil's advocate and say he is way ahead of expectations and he's healing much faster. That would put a recovery time of about early October, which may actually be why the team is hesitant to put him on the PUP list, because that's obviously going to lock him off the roster. Remember, they only have running backs in Alfred Blue and Lamar Miller, so they're pretty thin at the position, and if he can come back earlier than 6 weeks potentially, they're going to benefit by keeping him on the active roster. Either way you spin it, the odds are that you're drafting a player who's basically injured and is going to not be playing much, if at all, for the first 4 to 5 weeks of the season, which is going to take up a valuable bench spot, and if you don't have an IR spot, you're completely screwed. Secondly, if we're diving back into the statistics, each player that suffered the Achilles injury saw a significant decrease in both games played and game speed, meaning he likely isn't going to receive a significant workload when he gets back, or he may not even be the same player that he was before the injury happened. So if we're talking workload, just think about it. Would it be smart to just hand him 15 to 20 touches after not playing for what is essentially 1 month shy of an entire entire year? We just talked about it. This team is lacking running back depth and they need to keep their running backs healthy. Why would they just put him in harm's way immediately and risk potentially injuring him again? The team just wouldn't benefit from having that. Plus, who's to say that he is even going to be able to make the same types of plays that he was doing before his injury? So if we're taking all those things into account, why is everybody assuming that Foreman is just going to beat the odds and come back earlier than expected? He's also going to get a giant workload and is going to be as good as he was in 2017. Everyone's just hoping for the best case scenario, and this is fantasy. We all like to paint a good picture, but if you're putting all your chips on Foreman, you're definitely going to leave disappointed and you're definitely wasting a roster spot. Okay guys, before I get into the next player, quick break here. Don't forget to sign up for our giveaways. Take a moment, pause the video, go follow both Nick and I on Twitter, subscribe to the channel. You have to be subscribed. It's really easy. Just click the button right below this video and you're entered to win. We're going to be giving away signed memorabilia all off season long, and the next giveaway is going to happen at 20,000 subscribers, which is going to happen in a matter of weeks. So again, follow both Nick and I on Twitter, subscribe to the channel, and you'll be automatically entered. On to the next player, and that is Frank Gore. That's right, old man Gore. Don't worry, we're not just hating on these older backs, but when it comes to Gore, he is by far the oldest, coming in at 35 years old. That's right, 35, which is actually older than Aaron Rodgers, a quarterback. And it feels like Aaron Rodgers has been in the league forever essentially, and when it comes to Gore, he really hasn't been good for about 3 seasons now. As for 2018, he's currently on Miami, which got rid of their best offensive player in Jarvis Landry, and really they have a quarterback who hasn't played a full game since 2016. If you've been keeping up with the news, you may have heard Devontae Parker, he has a broken finger now. So that just leaves this Miami offense with Kenny Stills, Danny Amendola, and Albert Wilson for what should be one of the worst wide receiver cores in the entire NFL. To their credit, the defense is okay, but I mean, we're not going to realistically expect them to be good enough to keep this game in contention or at least into positive game scripts throughout the season. They're most likely going to be playing from behind in most of their game, and when we're talking about Gore, he's going to be that early down guy. He's going to get first down carries, he's going to get second down carries, and the Miami Dolphins are likely going to be down 2 scores late in games, which means they are going to be throwing at least 60% in those types of situations, which means Frank Gore himself is probably going to be game scripted out. It's no secret, nobody wants to own a back that's on a terrible offense with a defense that's not stellar. And for those of you who may be arguing that Miami is somewhat of a sleeper team, just keep in mind their projected win total in Vegas is 6.5, which is tied with Buffalo. And if you guys are going to put your money on anything, you got to go with Vegas because they spend thousands of dollars into researching and providing the best lines possible so that they can turn a profit. They're not just going to throw out wacky lines so people can take advantage of. And when you dive into the Vegas lines, there are only 3 teams with a lower projected win total, and those 3 teams, Cleveland, Arizona, and the Jets. The Dolphins are not expected to be good this season, and as for Gore, we cannot expect him to get a ton of work in the receiving game. Even if an injury happened to Balaj or Drake, his role is likely going to remain unchanged, and considering he was top 8 in total touches last season and still finished 18th in points per game, where is the potential upside that we're looking for in these late round running back targets? I know 18th in points per game seems respectable because hey, that's an RB2, but if you dive into the numbers, he had under 60 rushing yards in 10 of 16 games and scored over 13 PPR fantasy points just 4 times. One of those games was in week 17 when the fantasy season was over, and anybody who's played in a PPR league knows 13 fantasy points is not a whole lot. You can get that off the waiver wire pretty consistently. I said it before and I'll say it again, he did that all while still managing to be 8th in the league in total touches. So don't draft Gore. He's an old running back on a bad team with a ton of competition for touches, and even if he gets the touches, he's not going to be efficient and the scoring opportunities are going to be limited. So there's just no upside for Gore, and even if an injury happens, it's going to be next to impossible for him to still crack the top 30. The next player on this list is James White, and if you know anything about White, you know that he is nothing more than a desperate bye-week fill-in. He isn't a guy that you draft expecting him to move up the depth chart and get more touches. He's also not a guy that has a safe and consistent role? You would think so, because he's a pass catcher. He actually has the illusion of being like a Theo Riddick type guy in this Patriots offense, which we all know is a high scoring offense. But when you actually look at his numbers and his week to week consistency, it's just not there. He isn't guaranteed any amount of touches, and this backfield has transitioned into less of a focus on north-south rushers and more of a focus on bringing in as many solid pass catchers as possible, which means unlike in previous season, he has a lot of competition for his specific role, which is catching the ball. The Patriots have Rex Burkhead and Sony Michel, which are both more capable in the receiving game than other backs were in previous seasons. And when you compare Burkhead to James White 1-for-1, last season, Burkhead had 3.6 targets per game versus White's 5.1. And remember, you're talking about a guy they were just newly trying to integrate in the offense. They already weren't that far apart, and we know this team likes Burkhead, so we could see his role expand, and that's going to come at the detriment of James White. On top of that, we saw Burkhead, who showed an extremely strong red zone presence and a much higher catch rate than that of White. Both catch rates were really good, but Burkhead really did stand up and stand out when it came to his usage in the receiving game and his red zone usage as well. And if you're talking about total touches and you're talking about carries, Burkhead had more carries in 10 games than White had in any season of his entire career. And the point I'm trying to make is White is likely going to see an even more decreased role this year, and the rise of the pass catchers of players like Burkhead and first round pick Sony Michel, it's going to make White's already unpredictable performance week in and week out have even more larger swings, and we likely aren't going to see many swings on the high end of variance. So he's not going to have those 2 touchdown games, and his safety that he may have had, or the illusion of safety that he may have had in previous seasons, is just going to be completely shot out the window. The odds are if you do end up being an owner of White, you're just never going to have him in your starting lineup. So why even roster him? And if you do have him in your starting lineup, you probably have deeper problems than you probably like to admit. So the most likely scenario for White is that he ends up finishing 4th on this team in touches out of the backfield behind Michel, Burkhead, and even Jeremy Hill. As much as I hate to admit, Jeremy Hill does have some potential to be the short yardage and goal line back. And when we're talking James White, with a late round pick, we want players that have a realistic potential to be a top 20 player. It would take an injury to 2 players for him to be even somewhat consistent of a producer, which makes him an absolutely terrible pick considering other guys that are going in his range are only 1 injury away from being a consistent producer week in and week out. So he shouldn't be drafted, and he probably should just be a guy that's hanging out on the waiver wire for people in desperate need with a ton of bye weeks to just throw in their roster. The final player on this list is the only guy that we added in more of the earlier rounds, and we just wanted to add him because most of the other running backs that are going in that range, we see a potential for success for them. We see a way that they could be top 20 if, a couple things go their way. Ty Montgomery, we just don't see it, and his ADP is super high. He has now crept up in the 9th round and is currently going out front of players like Nick Chubb, who everyone who watches these videos know that we're a fan of in the later rounds, then Allen Hurns and DJ Moore, who were recently rising on. So overvalued is probably an understatement, because if you break down Montgomery's role, he cannot be anything more than a backup running back. And for those of you that think he's going to be involved in the receiving game, how can he be more than 4th at best in targets in this offense behind Jimmy Graham, Devontae Adams, and Randall Cobb? I get it, Cobb can't stay healthy, but are you predicting an injury to Cobb, Geronimo Allison to just be nothing? It's really a stretch to find a scenario where he succeeds in this passing game. As for his rushing ability, in 2017, he did play decently, but we can't give him too much credit because he was only able to average 3.8 yards per carry. A lot of his production came in the receiving game, and as an actual rusher out of the backfield, he did struggle to produce efficient performances. We all know Aaron Jones is the best running back on the ground on this team, so after his 2-game suspension, he's going to be the favorite to lead this team in touches on the ground. So for Montgomery, as for being used specifically as a pass catching running back, that is probably going to be a role that at best he is going to split with Jamal Williams, who has been working on his pass protection and has recently even caught a touchdown in the last preseason opener. So you have a guy who is inefficient as a rusher, who is going to get out touched on the ground by Aaron Jones and is going to be splitting receptions out of the backfield with Jamal Williams. So when most people are telling me why they want to take Montgomery, the mindset that they have, and what I'm hearing is, I'm not sure who gets the job. It's a running back by a committee, so I'll just take the guy who's the cheapest, and that guy is Ty Montgomery right now. Well, that's true, he is the cheapest, but where's the upside? His role is not going to be anything more than a change of pace guy. He can't handle a workload. He hasn't played a full season in his entire career. And let's say he does remain healthy and there's an injury to someone like Aaron Jones. Do you really think Ty Montgomery is going to be that guy that they use? No, that's going to go to Jamal Williams. So the best case scenario would be for Montgomery to overtake Williams as the primary pass catcher out of the backfield, whether that's through injury or maybe even changes to the depth chart. So yes, in that likely scenario, that would make him the clear pass catching back. So congratulations, your 9th round pick is really paying off. You now have a player providing similar value to someone like Chris Thompson, except the reality is you probably won't even be getting that type of production, because remember, this is Aaron Rodgers who's leading this team. They're not going to have a ton of game scripts that are going to heavily rely on catching passes out of the backfield. So even if he does solidify his role as the pass catching option out of the backfield, you're not going to be getting RB2 like numbers. So no matter which way you split it, this backfield is going to be a committee. It's very unlikely that any of these running backs are going to be a running back one without any major injury, and the Packers themselves have historically never really had strong running backs. So what does that leave you with? It leaves you with drafting the odd man out in what's already a messy running back situation, and you're taking on additional risk by drafting a player who just can't seem to stay healthy. And the worst part, that's a 9th round investment. To us, just sounds like you're throwing away a pick. Alright everybody, that's going to do it for this video. We really appreciate you guys checking in. If you like this video, please hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to sign up for the DraftKings deal while it still applies. Check the link in the description box below. You'll really thank us for it later. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.